What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another video. Similar to what I did last week with a few of my Polish bootlegs, I thought we would take a closer look at a few of my Mexican bootlegs. And these are kind of all over the map. I just kind of picked them up randomly, sort of randomly. I do have 3 Class 2s here, all different. And then I have a Han Solo Bespin Mexican bootleg. I wanted to start first with these two. They are, I'll move these out of the way so they're not kind of in the background here. But these two are part of what's called the Extended Shoulder series. We've talked about these in the past, but we've got the pink Class 2 here, which is... we won't get into what's going on with his arm there again. I've kind of made that joke already, but otherwise, I love this figure. I mean, it's just a really great sculpt and mold. But you can see here around the shoulder area, if I can zoom in, maybe you'll get a better look at it. You can see around the shoulder area, this is why it's called the Extended Shoulder Series, because they have these spacers that go between the arm and the torso area. Now, for whatever reason, every Class 2 that I have seen does have this kind of hole. I don't know if that's like an injection site or what, but they all seem to have this hole around the chest area. Some of them are more pronounced than others, but that's very common for all of these Class 2s, for the extended shoulder version. But what a great figure. I love the color. The other great thing about these Extended Shoulder Series Mexican bootlegs are that they come in such wacky colors. This is a bright pink. I'm not sure what the lighting, it's overcast today, so the lighting's a little different, but this is a bright pink color, and it's just crazy. You can see here another kind of molding defect from when the bootleggers were making this item. There's a gap right there in the back of the head. That's not common. I've seen a few other examples like this, and that's a whatever you want to call it, a factory error. But otherwise, just a really awesome figure. I actually got this on eBay a long time ago, maybe about a year ago, when I was first starting collecting, and this sat, and it finally came down to a reasonable price. From a pricing perspective for these Extended Shoulder Series bootlegs, these are genuine early 1980s, early to mid 1980s Mexican bootlegs versus some that are, they kind of cross over between the 80s and 90s, which these two do. I'll show you those in a second. But from a pricing perspective, most of these are priced anywhere from about $200 up into about, as high as about $450, just depending on the figure and the character. I've got another one here that I pulled down off the shelf that you've already seen. This is the 9 Yum. This is a beautiful example here in a bright kind of yellow color. I've shown this a number of times, so I won't rehash it, but you can see there he's got the extended shoulders. I love all the hash marks and kind of textures on his body, though. Very, very cool figure. But anyway, depending on the figure and the character and the color especially, that's kind of the price range for these Extended Shoulder Series. Some of the other characters that I'm aware of that they make these Extended Shoulder bootlegs for are the Gamorrean Guard. Those are always pretty popular and pretty high demand. Reese is another one that goes for quite a bit of money. And Yoda, which also does go for quite a bit of money. Now, these two have textures, as you saw around the spacers. This one, this Han Bespin, does not. And I'll see if I can get it to zoom in. But you can see where it's got the extended shoulder, piece there between the armpit and the torso. But it's a flat kind of non-textured, non-design kind of spacer. So that's a little bit different. But there are a number of ones like this one as well. Another example like this would be the Lando Calrissian in his skiff guard disguise. He does not have any textures on his. I've seen reuse in both textured and non-textured, but for Class 2 and for 9 Yum and for the Gamorrean Guards, I've only seen textured shoulders, I believe. And then Yoda is also another one that comes with no texture. So they're all over the map. Now, as I said, the color will often dictate the prices. But something like this, then this gray color or white or black, those are not very popular. You might be able to get those for as low as about $200. But if you start getting into the really, or white, white especially and black are very common. But when you start getting into the crazier colors like the bright reds and the green, if you got a Gamorrean guard in the green colors, those, obviously given that the Kenner figure was in green, those tend to command quite a bit of money, 400 plus. But silver, gray, white, black, those are all kind of pretty easy colors to find in general if you're looking hard enough, and don't go for nearly as much money as some of the other colors. Okay, so that's kind of some examples. I have a few other examples coming of these kind of extended shoulder bootlegs in my next batch. My next batch is almost all Mexican bootlegs, so we'll have a few others to compare to these. But I think I've talked enough about these. Let's take a look at these two. These are two Mexican bootleg Klaatuus. Now, both of these, this one's labeled as a 1980s, but if it's a 1980s, it's really a late 80s. The early 1980s version of this is a little bit wider, a little bit bigger, and does not have nearly as good of paint applications. Oftentimes, it's more of a translucent plastic that they use with very light paint. He doesn't have this kind of weird mustache thing going on, but it's a slightly different mold and much worse paint applications. But this is Klaatu. I would classify this more as a 1990s bootleg, though, but still a really great figure. I mean, I love the way it looks. And, as I pointed out during the unboxing, it's quite a bit smaller than the Kenner or Lily Letty figure. I pulled up my Lily Letty 85 plus Klaatu that, these came on a Made in Mexico card for the most part. It's got the flat fur, but you can see how different the size is. And I talked about that briefly in the unboxing, so I won't rehash that here. But it's quite a bit smaller. Now, the 1980s versions, to my knowledge, based on the photos I've seen, it's a little bit bigger. It's a little bit bigger. So so that is the Klaatu. We'll do one quick. I kind of skimmed over it quickly, but this is, if I can get my camera to focus. God, focus, buddy. There we go. So you can kind of see how it looks there. And there's a bunch of different color variations for this, but in general, with this deep, nice paint, I'd classify that more as a 1980s, or excuse me, as a 1990s. So, and then we have this one, which is an interesting one. This is Klaatu in a skiff guard disguise versus the regular Klaatu. But this is another one that's a fairly common Mexican bootleg that you can find for as cheap as 25 to 50 bucks, depending on the seller and if it's in an auction. Now, that's without the weapon. Now, this weapon is really a early 1980s weapon. That's got the really nice detailed mold to the vibro axe. And I've got another one coming like this Klaatu, not in the next batch, but in the batch after that has more of the 1990s mold to the vibro axe. That vibro axe is a lot thicker and a lot less detailed, but you can see how detailed that is. But this figure also came in the 1980s and 1990s. Very hard to tell apart, but again, it typically the 1980s, early 1980s version versus this late 80s, early 90s version. It's got a lot less detailed paint, and the figure is more of a translucent kind of plastic. And but still, nevertheless, I like the fact that they painted him silver. I don't know why they did that, but almost every one of the Mexican bootlegs that you see for this Klaatu skiff guard has that silver paint, if it's the later version. So, but that vibro axe, I kind of wish I'd saved that vibro axe for another true early 1980s figure, because that axe is more in keeping with the early molds of these figures versus the later 80s, early 90s molds. So anyway, again, no real point to these videos. I've never showed some of these without the poly bags, and so I thought that you guys would like to kind of take a closer look at them. And that is really all I got. Thanks for watching.